Okay, so imagine an illness that affects 1 in every 10 women. 1 in 10! But it stays hidden, almost like a medical ghost. It can cause absolutely debilitating pain, but it's so misunderstood that it takes a shocking amount of time to even get a name. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on that hidden illness, endometriosis.
And here it is, the number that just stops you in your tracks. 10 years. No, that's not a typo. That is the staggering average amount of time it takes for someone to get a proper diagnosis. Just think about that for a second. A full decade of pain, of confusion, of being told it's just bad periods, all while you're just trying to live your life.
So that really brings us to the core mystery we're going to try and crack today. What in the world is this illness? And more importantly, why, with all of our incredible medical advancements, does it remain so stubbornly hard to find? All right, let's get into it.
First up, let's talk about that decade of pain. This is the diagnostic dilemma.
To really get why it's so hard to diagnose, we have to understand what we're even looking for. So, what is endometriosis?
So, at its simplest, endometriosis is a disease of misplaced tissue. You have tissue that's supposed to be inside the uterus, the endometrium, but instead, it starts growing in places it has no business being. The key word, the whole problem, is outside.
Now here's where things get really messy. That lining inside your uterus, it builds up and sheds every month. That's what a period is. Well, this rogue tissue on the outside does the exact same thing. It follows the same monthly cycle. It bleeds, but unlike a period, that blood has nowhere to escape. It's trapped inside your body.
And this tissue can set up shop all over the place, on the outside of the uterus, on the ovaries, the fallopian tubes, you name it. And every single month, that internal bleeding causes massive inflammation, which leads to scarring and adhesions that can literally act like glue, sticking your internal organs together.
One of the most common things that happens is that this trapped blood forms cysts on the ovaries. And over time, these cysts fill up with old, dark, brownish blood. Medically, they're called endometriomas, but they have a much more memorable nickname: chocolate cysts.
And in really severe cases, these cysts can get so big and cause so much inflammation that the ovaries actually get stuck to the uterus and even to each other. When doctors see this on an ultrasound, they call it kissing ovaries. It sounds almost poetic, but it's a sign of a very serious problem. Okay, so we know what it is, but the million-dollar question is why? Why does this happen in the first place? Let's take a look at the prime suspects.
All right, the leading theory, the one you'll hear about most often, is called retrograde menstruation. The idea is pretty straightforward. Instead of all the menstrual blood flowing out of the body, some of it flows backwards, up through the fallopian tubes and into the pelvis. This blood carries those endometrial cells, and once they're in the pelvis, they can stick, implant, and start growing.
But wait, here's the plot twist. It turns out that a whole lot of women, maybe even most, experience some degree of retrograde menstruation, but only a fraction of them actually develop endometriosis. So that tells us something really important. This can't be the whole story. Something else has to be going on.
And here are some of those other suspects in our investigation. It's probably not one single thing, but a perfect storm of factors. Maybe the immune system isn't doing its job cleaning up those stray cells. There's definitely a genetic link. It runs in families. Hormones play a huge role, and there could even be environmental triggers involved. It's complicated. So with the causes being so murky and the symptoms all over the map, how in the world do doctors actually hunt for the evidence and finally get to a diagnosis?
Well, it starts with the clues, the symptoms. And this is where it gets so tricky. The list is long, and it's completely different for everyone. For one person, it might be crippling, chronic pain. For another, the main issue might be infertility with very little pain. This huge variation is a major reason why it gets missed or misdiagnosed for so long.
To get a clearer picture, doctors use tools like ultrasound and MRI. These are great for spotting those bigger chocolate cysts. But, and this is a big but, they often miss the smaller, flatter lesions that can still cause incredible pain. That's why the true gold standard for diagnosis is a laparoscopy. It's a keyhole surgery where a surgeon can actually put a camera inside and see the endometriosis with their own eyes. And having to rely on surgery for a definitive answer is a huge piece of that 10-year delay puzzle.
So once the evidence is in and the diagnosis is finally confirmed, what's next? What's the strategy for managing this condition?
And this is absolutely crucial to understand. Right now, there is no cure for endometriosis.
That means the entire goal shifts from trying to get rid of it completely to managing the symptoms, reducing the pain, and trying to get your quality of life back.
The first line of attack is usually medical. The basic idea is to control your hormones, because estrogen is like fuel for endometriosis. So doctors might use hormonal contraceptives to regulate your cycle, or even stronger drugs that basically starve the endometriosis by creating a temporary reversible menopause. Cut off the fuel, and the fire dies down.
Then, of course, there's surgery. That same laparoscopy used to diagnose the condition can also be used to treat it by cutting out or burning away the lesions. For really severe, widespread disease, a bigger open surgery might be necessary. A hysterectomy is also an option, but that's a huge, life-altering decision that's typically a last resort, especially for those who still want to have children.
And because infertility is such a common and heartbreaking part of this disease, fertility treatments are a huge piece of the puzzle for many. Sometimes just having surgery to clear out the endometriosis can be enough to improve the chances of conceiving naturally. In other cases, treatments like IUI or IVF are needed to bypass the damage.
And finally, there are all the things that you can do to feel more in control. Things like an anti-inflammatory diet, gentle exercise, or even just a heating pad can make a real difference in daily pain levels. And just as important is finding support, whether it's from groups or therapy, to deal with the emotional toll of living with a chronic illness.
So, we've come full circle. We know what endometriosis is, we've got some solid theories on why it happens, and we have strategies to fight back. But without a cure, the biggest question still hangs in the air. How do we change that 10-year wait? How do we stop the silence? Well, it starts with awareness. It starts with believing people when they say they're in pain. And it starts with having more conversations just like this one.